patients come for results, right? But they definitely will stay for the experience. Clinical outcomes are important, of course, but the decision to return to your office, I believe, happens before a patient may even step into your treatment room. So the little things that get overlooked, they're not so little. Things like eye contact, a warm smile, a team member standing up to greet you as you walk into the office, whether it's the first time or the 50th time.
When you scale, that's where some things can kind of break down as well. You're bringing in these other team members, and you may have this very strong mission and vision, but then things start to rapidly grow. And if you are not really intentional about keeping that foundation and bringing everybody back to that same loop, bringing them back in, what do we actually stand for? It's so easy to lose it because you start getting focused on those KPIs, those numbers. What's the revenue? Did we hit our conversion rates? And people, unfortunately, at times can start to compromise some of those mission and values to hit those higher numbers. And I think it's so important to stay within that loop, just like.
And that's really, it's important, particularly in the way medical aesthetics has become so transactional, right? So it's all about, the dollars at this point. And I just think that those are things that are short-term in nature. So I've always encouraged my team to take a longer view of what we're doing. And we want to help people, right? So we want to get in the trenches with them, understand what their problems are, and help them develop solutions to fix them.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Business of Aesthetics Annual Expert Panel Webinar. This empowering discussion will help you navigate challenges, leverage opportunities, and build a thriving career in aesthetics. Thank you for joining us and our panel of renowned industry leaders as they share actionable strategies, best practices, and valuable insights to tackle the unique leadership challenges faced by aesthetic professionals today. I'd like to welcome our panelists for this webinar. We have Heather Hughes Hardy with us. We have Dr. Keli Koniver, and we have Connie Kurczewski with us. Welcome. Great to have you all with us.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so much.
So today, with our Business of Aesthetics Expert Panel Webinar, we're going to be discussing the art. I like the art of patient retention, how top aesthetic practices build loyalty and trust. Boy, those are two big features, as we each and all know, in terms of building clients, increasing client volume, and getting referrals from existing clients. This is a live event, so please engage with your peers, ask questions, and we're confident you will leave equipped with actionable strategies that you can go ahead and implement immediately. But before we dive in, let me just ask you this. When potential patients in your area search for treatments you offer, does your practice actually show up, or are they finding your competitors instead? This is a major challenge for many aesthetic practice owners. You might be offering amazing services, but if you're not visible online, you're missing out on a steady stream of new patients. The good news, there's a fix. With the right digital marketing strategy, covering local SEO, targeted ads, and funnel-based content marketing, you can not only attract more inquiries, but convert them into actual patients walking through your doors. And here's the best part. If you stick around to the end, because we've got something special for you, we've got something that's going to help you take your practice's online presence to the next level. But more details to follow on that. I thought I'd just throw that little teaser in. And let's go ahead, before we launch into the questions we have set up for tonight, I'm going to introduce our panelists and myself, and I'll lead off myself. My name is Michael Walker, and I am a leadership coach, professional mediator, and facilitator. I'm passionate about helping set leaders and their teams up for success that matters, helping them lead themselves well so they can lead others well. And in fact, being able to go home at night and feel good about how they handled themselves and others. With a focus on communication, conflict, and change, my team and I at Capstone Coaching help unlock and engage the full potential of an organization and its people. Our first panelist is Connie Kurczewski. Connie is the founder of Elevated Practice Consulting, a trusted advisor to dermatologists and aesthetic practice owners. With over 25 years in medical practice management and a decade in aesthetics, she advises on leadership, team development, operations, patient experience, and strategic growth. Connie is passionate about helping clients build practices that run smoothly, perform consistently, pardon me, and keep the right patients coming back. I love that word passionate, Connie. That tells us a lot about how you're going to share tonight. And our next panelist up tonight is Heather Hughes Hardy. Heather is a registered nurse turned chief operating officer of a multi-million-dollar aesthetic practice turned independent consultant. With a deep background in women's health, aesthetic leadership, and consult to conversion sales, she brings a rare blend of clinical insight and operational strategy to the aesthetics industry. After helping scale high-performing teams and dramatically increase treatment acceptance rates, Heather co-founded the CORIT method, a values-driven brand that equips aesthetic providers, support staff, and practice owners with tools to lead confidently, close ethically, and create meaningful patient relationships. Whether she's consulting for top-tier medical practices or empowering individual aesthetic leaders, Heather's mission remains the same: to help others build a life of purpose, peace, and profitability. What a nice combination that is. And our third panelist tonight is Dr. Keli Koniver. Keli's journey from a family farm in Tifton, Georgia, to Charleston, South Carolina, is one filled with faith, hard work, and even some elements of fate mixed in. It was in this legendary coastal town where she earned her Bachelor of Science, MBA, and doctorate degree, all within one historic block. Later found the love of her life and perfect business partner, and eventually started her own thriving medical aesthetics practice. Keli began her career in healthcare consulting for the powerhouse Deloitte and Touche LLC in Atlanta, Georgia, and having rapidly progressed through the ranks at Deloitte, helping her clients navigate the complex challenges associated with the healthcare sector, she's decided to go back to school. You didn't think you had enough yet, Dr. Koniver. She went on to earn her doctorate degree in health administration at the Medical University of South Carolina, fully intending, like her class colleagues, to secure a senior leadership position in healthcare administration. But with a young son at home, she was not sure she really wanted the stress of a senior level position, and we have her here tonight. It is great to have all three of you. I'm going to just put up on the screen, you'll see that the points of discussion that we're going to cover, that as I said, I'm confident we'll be able to deliver an amazing and insightful webinar. We also have some great questions lined up for our panel, and I'm looking forward to, as I mentioned before, their insight. I think in best practices, that's one of the big takeaways we find from these webinars, that there's going to be something that's practical, actionable, if you will, best practices that you can use. And I've included the word passion here. And I think all three of them just have a resonance about passion. I'd also encourage you, as I mentioned before, to connect with us through chat on any questions you might have, and for sure, any comments you'd like to share as you hear things being presented by the panelists. Feel free to put the comments, happy faces, thumbs up, whatever it looks like. And if you do have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, and I will make a point of trying to introduce it in real time during the webinar. If for some reason I can't, I just want to assure you that Whitney, our podcast manager, will get the question, get the answer, and circle back to you with that answer. So nothing hits the ground, nothing falls between the cracks. So let's get started. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That's amazing me, all these buttons on Zoom, and the one button you have to always try and find to stop the share, it's the little tiny button somewhere there. So the first question I have is going to be for Connie tonight. And the question is, Connie, in your experience, what are the most overlooked elements that impact patient retention in aesthetic practices?
Yeah, well, let's see. Patients come for results, right? But they definitely will stay for the experience. Clinical outcomes are important, of course, but the decision to return to your office, I believe, happens before a patient may even step into your treatment room. So the little things that get overlooked, they're not so little. Things like eye contact, a warm smile, a team member standing up to greet you as you walk into the office, whether it's the first time or the 50th time. It's that subtle message that conveys, we've been expecting you. You're in the right place, and we're so glad you're here. I think when you can convey that kind of warmth at every visit, it really creates that emotional connection that is going to drive the loyalty, the retention that we're looking for. I do have an example of this. One of my favorite examples is one of my earlier clients who built their entire mission around the idea that every patient should leave or walk out our door feeling better than when they walked in. And while that seems simple, it has had a profound effect many years later. And every team member is trained to recognize something that makes a person feel significant, whether that's a genuine, unscripted compliment, acknowledging a birthday or a life event. Uh, it's something that has worked, and it works because it's not complicated, but it sticks. And I've actually, I know that this has an impact because in a few of the practices that I've worked with, I have, helped implement these strategies and then later gone back as a patient myself. I sometimes find myself driving away and thinking to myself in the car as I'm smiling, wow, they got me. I didn't even realize it, but that compliment just had me feeling really good about something they said or a moment that they created. So that's when you know it's working.
That's I love that, Connie. I put a challenge out to my clients. I say, what would it look like to unexpectedly delight your customers? Which is exactly what you're saying. And it's those little extras, it's those little things, if the ratio of communication, 7% is words, voice, 38% is tone, and 55% is body language. Hence the reason we're having trouble with all the texting going on. But this idea of just being physically present and connecting with the person, and I just love the way you put that. It's just, I think we just get too busy doing that and forget that. And the title tonight was about the art, and that
Right.
is the art side that we're talking about.
Right. I think we've forgotten the power of these little things that I've mentioned because they really do put a lot of deposits into the bank account when, in fact, something may go wrong down the road. That really is what people remember, that feeling, that connection. And so it is an art for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. Heather, I've got a question for you. How can aesthetic providers use emotional intelligence during consultations to build trust and increase treatment acceptance?
Yeah, I think so. Emotional intelligence is like the cornerstone of high converting trust-based consultation. So when we lead with curiosity and empathy instead of jumping like straight into solutions, we create emotional safety. And that's when patients start to open up. It actually shifts them neurologically from that reactive fight or flight into a more thoughtful and reflective thought pattern. And so what I teach is to slow down at the beginning of the consultation, kind of like Connie was saying, like really building that connection, and that speeds up the outcome. So you ask reflective questions, you mirror what you hear the patient saying, and you anchor the conversation and what they are saying that they want to preserve or create, not just what you can correct. And that is when trust happens. And when there's trust, treatment acceptance becomes the next natural step and not something that you have to push. Being a nurse myself, and I was not an aesthetic nurse doing like aesthetic treatments. I phased more into the administrative side, but as a bedside nurse in the hospital, even, you never want to feel like you're pushing your patient into doing something that is not what they want to do. And so it feels really good when you're able to partner with your patient and use that next level of connection to get them to where they want to be, and you're in it together in a partnership.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. This whole idea, you're mentioning right at the outset, I love that term, emotional safety. That's such an important word when you're dealing with such a very uh, significant feature of a person, and just so important to build. It's interesting. I tend to focus. I like this idea of thinking about. Obviously, we've got EQ, which is intellectual or emotional intelligence. I like to kind of think of EQ as being the science of people, and and we blend that with the art of relationships to come up with the emotional wisdom. And that idea of just really bringing the science and the art, which is what Connie was talking about, together, which I think that's where a lot of what we're going to be digging into is really looking more holistically at our practices from both the transactional of what we do and how we do it, as well as the relational and who we are and why we matter. And the way you laid that out was beautiful. Thank you, Heather.
Oh, thanks.
Dr. Koniver, I've got you up next, and you've built Koniver Aesthetics from the ground up, and you've done that with a lot of hard work and a lot of things in your journey. What core values or principles did you prioritize early on to foster long-term patient relationships?
Yeah, so I entered the industry because I came into the service industry because I genuinely, truly have a passion, a desire to serve other people. And I think that is probably the biggest cornerstone of the entire practice. I have led with honesty and integrity, and more than anything, authenticity. And I think in today's world, Heather, you talked about building partnerships and building these key relationships. That's really what it's about. They're looking for a partner. Yes, they come in and they're wanting results. You're absolutely right, Connie. Patients seek us because they're looking for comprehensive solutions for wow results, but that's not what keeps them in the practice. You've got to build these relationships. So I've just always led with honesty and integrity and authenticity. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. When you mentioned that word, with just taking trust, can you just unpack a little bit? Just how did you encourage your team to obviously emulate the values you were carrying forward in your business? And how did you help inculcate, I guess, a culture of trust? That would probably be the best way to put it.
And that's really, it's important, particularly in the way medical aesthetics has become so transactional, right? So it's all about, the dollars at this point. And I just think that those are things that are short-term in nature. So I've always encouraged my team to take a longer view of what we're doing. And we want to help people, right? So we want to get in the trenches with them, understand what their problems are, and help them develop solutions to fix them. And you have to have a relationship. So people buy from people. They have to trust you. So if you don't have that trust, it's generally short-lived. We've been in business now for a decade. We've had our wellness practice for almost 3 decades. You don't survive that long if people don't trust you. So I just encourage my team we rely on education a lot. We like to educate our patients. We like to develop these comprehensive aesthetic care plans. We like to go on the journey with them and just really develop genuine relationships. And I think that's what keeps people coming back for the long haul. And I think if you fast forward time 10 years from now, it's really evident the practices that prioritize the relationships, because 10 years from now, many of them won't still be here.
Thank you. And I think, yeah, exactly. That's that idea of authentic relationships. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that when you're busy and everything is number crunching, everything is formulated, sometimes we just forget to care. And I think I see that a lot in some of the comments. We've done some well-being sessions, and just when burnout, a lot of things that trigger burnout is the fact that we've lost sight of taking time to care, first of all, for ourselves, much less our staff and or our clients. So very well put. Thank you, Kelly. I've got a question for you, Connie, and the question is, how can a practice owner or manager effectively train their team to deliver a consistently exceptional patient experience? Well, we touched on that. Let's go deeper.
Yeah, so how can a practice owner or manager train their team to deliver a consistent experience? So, I mean, you can't train your team to deliver an exceptional experience if you haven't first defined what that experience looks like, right? A lot of practice owners that I see, at least in the beginning of working with them, they think their team knows what a 5-star experience is or looks like or feels like. And, we've heard that term thrown around for years on social media, 5-star experience. But, unless you've spelled it out clearly for your team and what it means for your practice, you're just leaving it to chance. How do you want your patients greeted? What's the tone and the text of the emails and the follow-up calls? how do you want your patients to feel each step of the journey that they take in your practice? If that vision isn't mapped out, your team's just going to fill in the blanks. And, they may do a great job sometimes, but that's just a door that's left open for inconsistency. And if we're talking about trust and loyalty, consistency is what builds trust. So, if the patient experience hasn't been a focus in your practice until now, certainly start with a foundational training, but don't stop there, right? Just one training is not going to be enough. It's the rhythm that's going to weave it into the culture of your practice. So, it could be as simple as, starting your Monday huddle with how are we going to wow them today? And talking about pieces of that patient journey or that patient experience and just hyper focusing on one. Don't wait until the quarterly team offsite to visit the topic of, the patient experience. I like to say, systematize the predictable parts of your patient experience so that you can free up your team's energy to personalize the exceptional ones. And, when experience becomes part of how you operate, and not just something you talk about once a quarter, that's when, you become a practice where you're known for your culture of creating that experience because your team will own it.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. It totally really resonates with me. And you mentioned that 5-star experience. As a mediator, pretty much all of the conflicts that I deal with, and a lot of them over the years, there's a common theme, and that is that there's two people having a conversation that are speaking a foreign language to each other, because they've just assumed that a term like 5-star experience or success or integrity or whatever it is, that we all have the same definition, or you should just know. There's some, like, by osmosis, you should know what that is. And so I love this idea of bringing clarity to that. Is if you sit your team down and say, what do you have? If I say 5-star experience, and I ask you, what are you passionate about a 5-star experience, you're going to have a whole bunch of different answers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's going to be a common theme that becomes the collecting point for the vision and the values. And I think it's really important to take stock of what terms are you using, that perhaps there's not a common denominator that lines up to the vision, if you have one, and the values that are underpinning that Dr. Koniver was talking about. It's just so important to take the time to do that. It's really like it's building a foundation.
For sure. And I think you said it, you said vision if you have one. I think the vision is absolutely, imperative to have if you're going to, get a team on board with following you as the leader. You have to have that vision, have it crystal clear, and communicate it consistently.
I was trying to be kind.
I know nobody wants to spend time on that in the beginning. Yeah. Nobody wants to waste time, but eventually they come around.
The vision, it's like the idea of, what do you, who are you, and what do you, and why do you matter, is what vision represents. And if you don't have that articulated in a way with values like Dr. Koniver was saying, that underpin it and support it, so it becomes non-negotiable moving forward and doesn't get pulled around and into places it shouldn't. Mm-hmm. But it's just a building block, it's a power tool. It's so important. Thank you. Yeah. Next question I have is for you, Heather. And the question are, what are some of the common communication mistakes you see providers make that can unintentionally harm the patient relationship? That's really good. That's a great question. The sense of, not all the stuff we talked about, it's not the question that we ever set out to not communicate or not do this. It's just that we were never intentional with designing a system that actually supported good communication. I always like to say, your system's perfectly designed to achieve the results you get. If every 4th car is missing its right front fender, all the pointing and yelling at that 4th car without the fender is not going to change until you change the system. And it's just so important to be intentional with that. Heather, can I throw that question up to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And I feel like every single provider I've met, the core denominator is that people get into medicine because they want to help people. They care about people. And so I think that there's a very well-intentioned person that becomes a medical provider, but a big unintentional, kind of mistake that I see people often make is talking at patients instead of with them. And so a lot of providers believe that education equals authority, and they start going and talking about anatomy and product names a little bit too early. And that can actually overwhelm patients and create more uncertainty instead of less. And you certainly want to educate. But if the focus is solely there without taking the time to really see your patient and understand what brought them into your chair, you're missing a really big opportunity to build a well-informed patient-provider relationship. And another mistake that kind of goes along with this is jumping into that correction mode. A lot of providers are very solution-oriented, and they hear something, they're like, how can I fix this for you? How can I help? And so they're pointing out, you have some volume loss here, some asymmetry here, but they're doing it before they've built that emotional safety. And it might feel very clinical and normal, but it can feel like criticism to the patient. And so communication in aesthetics, I believe, is really about attunement, not just what you say, but how you say it and how you're making, or whether you're making your patient feel seen and like they're in a safe space with this person to really open up. You have, you know, I just became a mom. My daughter's turning, she just turned 1, and it's a very big experience to go through. Your whole body changes. And the times that I was in practice prior to becoming a mom and now afterwards, I just have a little bit of a better understanding. This person coming and sitting down and saying, "Hey, I have these stretch marks that I didn't used to have." And for you, it's like, okay, at every single patient that comes in here, okay, yep, next, I've seen it before, I've seen it before. But this person is like, I'm exposing myself here. I feel really uncomfortable. And so really being very intentional about the fact that this person is trusting you with such big insecurities, I think is so important, and something that we need to reground ourselves in very often, because it can become so monotonous. Every single patient that comes in, you just see as part of your normal routine, when to them, this is a very big step that they're taking.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Yeah, absolutely. And you used the concept. I mean, this is a change. It's a change. I heard a comment the other at another when somebody said, I looked in the mirror and I wasn't familiar with who I was looking at. And I thought, that's a really good way of putting it. And the idea of change, what's interesting is that 70% of change in organizations, and probably Dr. Koniver and her business background would support me on this. And the number one reason there's 70% of change fails is because of lack of communication, and communication that doesn't have a wide enough entry point for everybody to hear it and for everybody to find their right pace of going through change. And so critical with patients are you speaking their language? And yeah, I love the way you put that. I won't touch the stretch marks. It's like change. I always say, people say I hate change. I said, no, you don't really hate change. You're not keen on the transition. I love the idea of having 20 pounds off and being able to bench press what I did 20 years ago, but I'm really not keen on the transition to do that.
So true.
But so change is something we've adopted it like a noun as opposed to a verb. And so it's so important when you're in such a science-driven practice, because most of us just don't understand it. But it's not even, I don't need to, I don't, and you've all said, I don't need to understand completely the science, but I do need to trust you. And that's really that's the transition point. And moving, Dr. Koniver, this kind of, I didn't mean to do this, but I kind of set this up. But in what ways do you think a practitioner's personal presence and energy can directly impact a patient's trust and return rate?
Always, really. I think it's interesting. It's so important. But one of the things that I'm glad Connie is on this call. So really where this became a challenge for me in my clinic, I'm very confident in my ability to build these relationships with patients. I know the importance of the presence and energy that you bring to that treatment room. I think where it became challenging for me in my clinic is when you begin to scale. So, when you're a smaller solopreneur, you're doing everything on your own. And then when you begin to scale, you have to assimilate a team. And just as you mentioned, that team has to share your same values and beliefs and, the core principles that you want to guide your business. And I think that's where you were very helpful for us, Connie, is just creating these systems and the training. And, And really for me, just the hiring, I think that, if you're talking about presence and energy in a room, it really guides everything. You want that patient to feel welcomed. You want them to feel safe. You want them to feel cared for. And that is 100% how that relationship goes with the provider that's treating them. So how do you deliver that when you're scaling a business and you now don't only have one individual delivering those services, but 5, 10 different people? I think that's where it comes down to these systems and training and, really ensuring that you're hiring people that embody those beliefs. So to answer your question, it kind of answered it itself. It's all.
Thank you. Yeah, you use that, we're talking about relationships, authentic relationships. That's a great phrase that, again, can we actually, without asking, can we actually be confident to know that each of our team members actually have a definition for that word that they can align with the passion and the vision for the organization? And if you're brought up in a household that didn't look like that at all, that suddenly, it can be a surprise downstream when you're suddenly expecting something and it's not happening. That's what I find quite often. It's not that people don't want to do it or they don't understand it or they're in the wrong role. It's just perhaps we haven't empowered them with the right information to give them the best tools to be the best version of themselves. And it just and in your business, you guys are, as you say, it's so much about helping people be the best version of themselves, however they define that. It's frustrating, I guess, at some level that it doesn't always work that way, and it's just really what you guys are sharing. And I would just remind our viewers and our listeners that you're listening to 3 of the experts in this field. That if you're hearing something that's caught your attention, some thought or some direction, or made a little, I always like to try and capture a sound bite, something that I can circle back around. You'll be able to circle back around to any of these 3 experts and check in with them, ask them a question, find out more that you want on that. If this is an area that you see need in, well, we're kind of setting you up for success here with these folks. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm going to go to Connie. And the question I have for you, Connie, is what role does leadership play in shaping the patient journey and building long-term trust? Clearly, trust is in our primary neighborhood tonight. Trust, passion, and integrity, probably.
Well, leadership shapes the patient experience more than any script or protocol or system ever will, right? Because your team is constantly watching you, how you interact with patients, how you handle pressure, what you praise, and maybe more importantly, what you let slide. That's what sets the tone. It's not just the service, but it's the standards in the practice. So in practices where the patient retention is very strong, there's usually a consistent standard of excellence that's been modeled from the top and reinforced kind of throughout the practice. That does show up in huddles, side-by-side shadowing and things like that, even the way that you deliver feedback. So small leadership habits create that alignment. But one of my core beliefs is that, patients will never fall in love with your practice until your employees love it first. When your team feels supported and seen and heard and connected to the mission that we talked about earlier, that energy comes through to the patients. The employees are delivering the patient experience. So that's how trust is built, in my opinion, with the team first, and then it's delivered to your patients.
Thank you, Connie. I think you hit the nail on the head as far as, if it's not, you don't want them in a place where they have to go to work or come to work. You want that they get to come to work, that they just can't wait. You become a first choice employer that everybody wants to work for, and that the leadership, it lives and dies on the leadership. And Mark Twain said, his saying he had is that if you think you're a leader, every once in a while you should look behind and make sure and see if anyone's following.
Yeah.
So leadership is not, it's not a DNA thing. It's a work, and all 3 of these ladies have worked at leadership. They've invested in that. All of us do. It's critical to do that because it's like muscle. You've got to work it. You've got to build it, and it's just not going to suddenly appear on you. So thank you, Connie. Heather, the next question is for you. And so how can aesthetic practices align their values with patient care to create more meaningful and lasting relationships?
So I think it starts with actually getting clear on what your values are and then making sure that they actually show up in the way that you care for your patients. A lot of practices have these beautifully written mission statements that they display, but when the patient actually walks through the door, the experience doesn't necessarily match. And when that disconnect happens, trust starts to break down. And these days, it takes more than just being good at what you do. You have to be good at the delivery of it as well. And that means the tone, the timing, your energy. If you say that you value care and caring for your patients, then they should feel it in how you manage time, how you listen, how your team shows up. Just like Connie was saying, it's a full practice delivery. And when there's alignment between what you say and how the patient feels, I think that's what creates loyalty. Having true alignment in what your vision is, what your values are, and then being displayed through your practice and through every person that works within your practice.
Thank you, Heather. We use a model, a strategic planning or business planning, whatever you like to call it. We call it it's the legendary six. It's like if you think of a number six, you think up at the top point of the six, that's where your vision is at the top there. And the vision is who you are and why you matter. And then right underneath that, holding that there are the core values that hold and protect and the integrity and the essence of who you are and why you matter. And then you kind of come down the arm of the six to the connecting point where the circle starts to meet. And that's where the mission is, which is what we do and how we do it. And then we work our way around the six where we have our goals and we have our objectives and we have our action steps. In most organizations, that's how it's built. But what happens is they just live in the circle in the six. So they just circle around KPIs and so it's goals, objectives, action steps, and they come back to mission, which is about what you do and how you do it, and they lose sight of who they are and why they matter. It's just a plaque on the wall, just to what you said, Heather, becomes something that we wrote down. It was really good when we wrote it down. It was awesome. But so we've added into the circle at the top after the goals, objectives, action steps, we've added in celebrate the wins in the circle. But we encourage the wins to be connected back up to who we are and why we matter, as well as what we do and how we do it. Everyone wants to go to the KPIs over here, but when we go up here, we go, well, my win this week was that Heather I watched her just make this little girl just delight with this little candy she gave her and a little toy. That doesn't have that's a KPI. It's just not the way we tend to look at KPIs in quote unquote the soft stuff, but the soft stuff is where the relationships are, and the relationships are what drive business. So I don't know if that makes any sense. That's just how we've found that celebrating the wins and incorporating that has really been significant and empowering for teams to really feel more valued and heard in the organization.
I love that. I think keeping it in that loop is so important. And I think it crosses over to, like Dr. Conover was saying, when you scale, that's where some things can kind of break down as well. You're bringing in these other team members, and you may have this very strong mission and vision, but then things start to rapidly grow. And if you are not really intentional about keeping that foundation and bringing everybody back to that same loop, bringing them back in. What do we actually stand for? It's so easy to lose it because you start getting focused on those KPIs, those numbers. What's the revenue? Did we hit our conversion rates? And people, unfortunately, at times can start to compromise some of those mission and values to hit those higher numbers. And I think it's so important to stay within that loop, just like you're saying. I'll have to look that up. Would you call it the strategic six?
The legendary six. It's our product we use for it's our product actually. But if you want to, I'd be more than happy to give some of that to you. But I wanted to. So if you think about, I think about Volkswagen, and they decided to lie to the customer, and yet one of their core values was integrity, because they never went back up with celebrate the wins back up to who we are and why we matter. They just focused on the KPI of return to shareholder. Wells Fargo's in lying to their customer, same thing, creating false bank accounts. And honesty is one of their core values. So it's just so easy to get caught up in the KPIs, but it's nothing wrong with these are critical. If you don't have money, you can't exist. You can't hit payroll. That's the bottom line. But it's the idea, though, of expanding the thinking of KPIs, not just being transactional, what we do and how we do it, but relationally about who we are and why we matter. And then bringing that together where the creative space is, where you become the first choice employer and everybody wants to work for you.
Mhm.
Sorry, got me excited. I don't have
Yeah.
that on that. Dr. Koniver, I'm coming back around to you. And the question I have for you, can you share how you and your team manage patient expectations? That's especially when it comes to results from treatments like lasers and injectables. And I think if we can talk on that, just like this, sometimes what I've heard is people are just over the top ecstatic about the results, and some are not as happy, and some, and I'm sure that's part of the journey is, but, and how do you communicate and work and manage those expectations? What I think is probably a big part of a either. And remember too, we do have people that are just starting out and perhaps in their practice and not scaling yet. So just sort of set that tone too.
Yeah, I mean, in our practice, we've really prioritized education. So in the medical aesthetic space, we operate in the minimally to non-invasive arena. So we're not surgeons. We're making change in millimeters, not centimeters, and certainly not inches. So what I try and do is educate my patients on the way that we age. There's multi dimensions of aging, from laxity to volume loss, skin quality concerns, et cetera. And I really try and focus our treatments on addressing those key dimensions. And I just boil them down into those key dimensions to help them understand it. And you can write it out whatever way works well for you to convey that. But a part of that education is just helping them to understand, again, I'm not a surgeon. This is not a moment in time. These are routine, ongoing treatments that we're offering. We have collagen, elastin, hyaluronic acid, that all breaks down and degrades as we age. So most of these services that we're offering, they're just designed for routine neocollagenesis, routine collagen stimulation. And I think it's important to educate patients on that. Again, if you look at the transactional nature of this industry at this point, it's very much focused on a sale, right? And I think providers often mislead patients sometimes when they're so focused on those KPIs and the conversions, et cetera, that they fail to communicate that correctly to patients. It's just like going to the dentist. You can't work out once and be fit, unfortunately. You can't eat broccoli once and be healthy. These are routine, ongoing services that we offer. And I think just educating patients on that is really important.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Koniver. When we think of that idea though of expectations, can we, sometimes do we create unrealistic expectations, or does it, if the patient perhaps probably more likely has unrealistic expectations, is there a technique for tempering that at the front end that can, again, I understand, I hear you on the education side, but I'm sure that that's got to be, or maybe I'm wrong, but that would probably be an issue.
Well, you'll appreciate this. We just received a 1-star review. Being very vulnerable, we just received a 1-star review, and it was a patient that has struggled with acne her whole life. We did an AviClear laser on her, and somewhere along the way, either in the marketing material or communicating with her provider, she thought that this would fully cure her acne, for the rest of her life potentially. And that was very obviously a breakdown in communication, whether it was something she read online or heard from a friend or something our provider said. These things do happen. And I think it's just, if you have that relationship built with your patient, it all just circles back to relationships, right? So you're level setting their expectations, but you've also built a personal relationship with them so that when their expectations are not met, as Connie said, it's kind of insurance in the bank or deposits in the bank.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it definitely happens, but the expectations are the hard part of this industry.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, and it's so easy. It's not even overselling. It's, we were talking about it earlier. If you let your emotions drive the bus and you've gotten all excited and something's got you all then it could be a very slippery downslope on that.
Right.
And,
So you just
yeah.
lead with compassion, and you
Yeah.
do your best to get in the trenches with these people, if you will, and
Yeah.
just understand where they're coming from, and yeah, lead with compassion.
And I don't know if I'm sure that you guys would do this, but it's I think it's when you do have something like that, what a great opportunity to reverse engineer the whole experience, and just really break it down to find out, which I'm sure you'll be doing, but just where was the touch points and how did this happen, and really, and it has benefit both from figuring out what needs to change, but it also has the benefit of empowering and bringing a greater camaraderie to your team and a closer connecting point too. So thank you for that, Dr. Conover. Connie, question for you is, can you share an example of a practice that turned around the retention rates by improving internal operations or team culture?
Yeah, of course. One 4-year-old practice comes to mind. They were on track. They were kind of having that initial boom of business, and patient attraction wasn't an issue. They were kind of becoming known for having great results, and like I said, new patients were coming in regularly. But around that 4-year mark, there was just a drop off in the retention, and so patients were coming back. And that's when I was called in, and we took a little bit of a deep dive to find out what was going on. And it was clear from my perspective that there was some operational breakdowns at some critical points. We're talking about trust and expectations. uh, those touch points were around pricing, right? Price quotes and policies weren't being communicated. They weren't being done consistently. So there was no handoff at the front desk. So appointments weren't being rebooked. Uh, Follow-up was non-existent. So these were just a few of the things that were contributing to the attrition rate. So we focused on tightening up the basics, right? Getting back to the basics of clear protocols, training, communication. I think that many practice owners, both established and those starting out, grossly underestimate the amount of staff training that it takes, even with established staff. But because today it seems like we have people coming in and out of positions a little bit more frequently, you just have to bake staff training into your operations. But getting back to my story, one of the other things was we started to create accountability and really just put one person in charge of making sure that the loop was closed around the follow-up. So just these few things, we started to see the arc trend upward with patients just having booked appointments before they left the office. And then the experience was better right away because they were being guided as opposed to just treated. While they liked the results, as we talked about earlier, they come for the results, but they stay for the experience. Even in the reviews, people aren't able to articulate what it is exactly that was good. They did start to see improvements in that. So the one thing about internal systems is that patients may never see them. You don't want them to see them, but they should absolutely feel them.
Yeah, that's again, now we're back into the art. And
Right, yeah.
the art starts at the heart, not the head.
In common sense, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's sometimes hard to teach that.
yeah. Well, it's again, we're back to leadership. What people will
Model.
emulate what they can identify with and see and they value. Uh, Heather, a question for you is, what role does team cohesion and internal culture play in shaping the patient experience and ensuring they return?
Yeah, I think this is very on brand with what we're talking about. And it sounds harsh, but it's true. If you can't retain your team, you can't expect to retain your patients. They can feel the culture, whether you've built it intentionally or not. And so when we talk about client retention, most people are focusing on things like follow-ups and loyalty programs, but the real driver, at least in my experience, has been consistency. And consistency comes from your culture and what you've built within it. Patients come back when they when they trust not just the provider, but the entire experience. So just like we were just saying, or y'all were just saying, they come for the results, but they stay for that experience. And so that only happens when your team is aligned. And alignment doesn't come just from stated expectations from the top, it comes from modeling from the top. And so good leaders, they don't just talk about standards, they actually embody them. And when team members see that kind of ownership, they reflect it back both to each other and to the patient. You can't, walk around as a leader preaching these things that you want your team to do, but then turn around and do the exact opposite. And I know I feel like oftentimes there is such a desire for growth and innovation. And what we were talking about earlier, you can't sacrifice the foundation to build a bigger roof because eventually it's all just going to crumble. You have to focus in, you have to loop back, you really have to empower your team and be that leader that they need. So be in it with them. Um, I think so often it's really easy to lose yourself. And something that I really love about the aesthetics industry, but can also be, a double-edged sword, is that at least in the practices that I've worked with and have been lucky enough to work within, um, they really promote within, which I think is wonderful and incredible. But oftentimes there is a lack of business understanding. And so these people who are phenomenal, incredible employees are put in manager positions and they go from being peers to someone's manager and they have no idea how to manage that new relationship. And it really can break down quite rapidly. So I think when you're being very intentional with your team and you're shaping your culture, you're also shaping your patient experience.
Thank you, Heather. You said something there, and I love that saying, come for the results, stay for the experience.
Oh, that was Connie. I heard her just
Oh,
say
was
that in
it?
that. I
Sorry.
can't take
Yeah.
credit.
So
I
I
don't
just
own
want,
it.
so now so that's a great saying, makes sense. Okay, people want the result and the experiences. So the results are the very transactional, what we do and how we do it. And the experience is who we are and why we matter and the connectable points. But there's a third piece to this that is this is where that entire saying and that vision for somebody to do that uh, becomes an economic value. Because the third part is you come for the results, you stay for the experience, but you can't wait to give it away. Every who doesn't want to tell their friends about this great place that they have the best mochaccino coffee and they have this treatment and they smile at me and they do this. Look at me. It's just that holistic experience, and and what's interesting is that's from a client perspective, but the very same messaging occurs with the team. It's there's no and it's just that idea is that I can't, I just in the best place ever to work. That's what I know hiring and retaining and hiring and finding people is very difficult. But the number one reason people leave is not because of the money. It's because the Gallup poll just recently came out. Last year it was because they weren't valued and heard. This year they've built into that also that they weren't respected. So that's hard data. And so, what do we do to do that? Just our experts are talking about, being very intentional with how we invest in leadership and relationships and empowering our people to have the tools to be the best version of themselves and to line up with the vision that we have for the organization. It's so funny, Connie, that I kind of tried to jump over that a bit, and it's become the foundation of this conversation today. Dr. Koniver, I've got a question for you. What does a successful post-treatment follow-up look like in your practice, and how has it improved patient trust or loyalty?
Right. Well, we created a system for follow-ups, and I think that's probably the most important thing, is to actually have a system in place. I've worked with a number of other clinics over the years, and it's really interesting the number of practices that do not have a follow-up plan in place. It's astounding the amount of business that is lost to lack of follow-ups. So make it a point, as Connie mentioned, we have an individual that is assigned to closing that feedback loop. So we reach out to the patient the day after the appointment. We obviously have an EMR and Zenoti that sends them an automated message, but we don't leave it at that. We want to personally connect with that patient, whether that's on the phone or by email or by text. We want to follow up with them, see how their experience went, see if there's anything that we can do better or different. We have started printed off their post-procedure instructions on a card. You know, patients forget sometimes what you tell them in the room when they're immediately post-treatment. So we send them out the door with this card. We ensure that it has all of the instructions that they need to follow on it. We make sure we have our phone number, our email. We let them know that if anything happens, it's 2 a.m. in the morning and you need something, feel free to reach out to this line. And we're just there for them. I'm really astounded at the number of practices that just quite literally do not follow up. You know, there's all these different studies of patients coming into various plastic surgery clinics having $30, $40, $75,000 facelifts, and there being zero contact from the clinic afterwards. That's amazing to me. So I think just having a follow-up plan in place and having someone assigned to it is really, really important. Another thing that we do that I think is important, you know, we don't nickel and dime patients at checkout with regard to the post-procedure stuff that they need. So we've done a really good job of bundling that into the service that they're getting. I think that's important because the last thing you want is them to get a subpar result because they have to spend money on, you know, whatever aftercare post-procedure products. So we've just tried to make the follow-up process, the post-procedure process, we've integrated it into what we're doing, and it's just how we do things.
Thank you, Dr. Koniver. I think, you know, that pricing piece is an interesting. We've had some conversations around that. You know, I don't think people really want to look at the aesthetics services in a commodity light, like shopping price and finding the best price. And from what I'm hearing, what I've seen so far, is they're really looking for what we've been talking about tonight, which is a relationship. And the price is secondary to that. I'm sure it's got to be it's still within the scope of what makes sense to them and all that. But I think, the fact that there is a lot of pushback on price point, I've heard this conversation, suggests that that we have made it too transactional, that we've lost sight of that. I call it, do you want to have commodity pricing or relationship pricing? Or a blend of both? And how do you do that? And so just, if that makes sense to you, Dr. Koniver, can you speak to that at all? Just how you've approached that?
Yeah, 100%. I just try to add more value than any of my competitors are willing or able to. And that's how I approach the commoditization. You know, when you're delivering more value, you're not competing because it's no longer apples to apples. So you're exactly right. The private equity money is entering the space big time now for a reason. And things have become very commoditized. The industry is hyper congested, some areas more so than others. We're all offering a lot of the same things. And so it's, how do you set yourself apart? How do you deliver that patient experience? And one of the ways that I deliver the patient experience is I just focus on adding unbelievable value. You know, so we got caught in the game several years ago when things started ramping up, and, you know, post-COVID, the medical spa space quite literally exploded. Anybody that could practice medical aesthetics was practicing medical aesthetics at that time. And we all got caught in this discount game, and it's quite literally a race to the bottom. And I can't compete at the bottom. That's not what I set out to achieve. I really want to take care of people. I want to nurture them. I want to make them feel seen and heard. And I can't do that charging $7.50 a unit for Botox. There's a competitor right down the street from us with huge billboards all over every interstate that you drive here in Charleston. Botox, $7.50 a unit. I don't know about most of you on the call, but I quite literally can't buy it for $7.50 a unit. You know, so this commoditization is really real, but I think you just have to shift the narrative and say it's not commoditized when we're not comparing apples to apples. I am confident I can deliver more value than the competition. And one of the ways you deliver value is focusing on your patient experience. Patient experience is rooted in relationships.
Thank you, Dr. Koniver. And meaning that adding value is not about necessarily giving them something that costs you something in terms of a product, but it's actually investing in them in the form of a relationship. And I think it's just, and looking at the cost of that, there's a cost obviously to that because that's labor and that's a factor. But labor investing in labor for adding value is like an annuity. It's going to pay dividends downstream.
Mhm.
Giving something today in a product will only carry its value till the next time. So it's just such an important process. I just realized what time it is, and I'm just going to have to shift gears here and I'm going to just share my screen. And you guys have been amazing tonight. I wanted to as you recall, I mentioned to you that we have a very interesting gift for you, and here it is. It's a gift from the founder of the Business of Aesthetics Expert Panel Webinar. His name is Narain Aruja, and Narain is the CEO of Equa Marketing, a digital marketing organization for doctors and medical professionals. So as a token of our appreciation of your time and your participation, Narain is offering you a free marketing strategy meeting with Lila Stone, who is the Business of Aesthetics and Marketing Director of Equa Marketing. Lila has established herself as a trusted expert in digital marketing and is passionate about empowering medical professionals with the marketing tools and knowledge to stand out in a competitive market. You can see from the slide in front of you, she has considerable specializations. And if you're looking at this, she covers all aspects of aesthetic practices. I think what's really important here, what I have heard and what I take away is that just what we were talking about tonight, the idea that, are we following up with customers? Do we have a system for capturing? Are we getting everything that's coming online? They say now 45% of web traffic comes after hours. Have we got a mechanism? Well, part of this strategy meeting just helps you know that you've got a system that is working for you even when you're at home, and working for you in follow-ups, and working for you with all the things. And if you're an expert in marketing and all the science of this, I'm not, then what I'm saying probably isn't that important. But if you aren't, then I just really encourage you can go ahead and scan the query code on the screen with your phone, unless you're using that for the webinar, or you in the chat, you'll see that there's a link there, and you can go ahead and just click on that. And this is a 1-hour session. Lila's going to spend 6 hours doing some research and preparing, and then she's going to present her findings, share those with her. And whenever I get an opportunity like this or an offer, I always want to evaluate it. We all do. And I ask myself 2 questions. The first question I ask myself is, what's at risk to take this on, to go ahead and click and have a free marketing session? Well, I can tell you the risk is simply your time. And your time's valuable. I totally get that. And we so appreciate you taking it tonight. But that's really the only thing, because there's no hooks or tricks in this. The second question is probably more relevant to this moment, this time, and setting yourself up for success. And that is, what's at risk if I don't? So I'll leave that with you to consider. And I highly recommend going ahead and having a meeting with Lila. It'll be so worth your while. But as I want to just shift gears and just say thank you to our expert panel, to Connie and to Heather, to Dr. Koniver. All 3 of you guys were amazing. Such insight, as I fully expected. Best practices, hands down, and actionable content. Man, there's so much we can take away and work on together. As I like to say, you collectively have made the complex simple, the hidden visible, and the difficult easy. So secondly, thank you to all of our attendees for the privilege of your time and your participation. Cap S, I saw your comment in the chat saying we need to have another session on employee retention. And I know that Whitney said, we're going to work on that. And I think, Whitney, we probably have 3 candidates here that would be great for that session, but I'll just park that for the moment. But we do really appreciate your time. And without you, we don't grow together, and we don't set each other up for success. That's what this is about. Building community, building success, one practice and one person at a time. A reminder to like, share, and review us on your favorite social media, and you can be part of someone else's success. We love shares and likes and follows. You should too. So until next time, keep striving for excellence. Excellence both in what you do and how you do it, and who you are and why you matter. And of course, exceptional patient care. On behalf of our panelists for tonight, thank you. Until we see you next time.